I grew up in a small town, Central California, and the movie theaters there didn't show, much beyond Bridge on the River Kwai and The Blob. So I didn't really experience foreign films until I found my way into film school. And at that point is when I was actually exposed to Kurosawa. And a friend of mine, John Milius, actually was a huge fan of Kurosawa's. And so whenever the film was showing, he'd say, "Oh, you got to come and see this. You got to come and see this." And after the first one, the first one I saw was Seven Samurai, and after that I was completely hooked. I said, this is really good. It's hard to really appreciate the true genius of Kurosawa, I think, until you've seen a few of the films, and then you've been able to see other films at the same time and be able to realize his visual style. My favorite of all time is really Seven Samurai. Then maybe Yojimbo, and then Akuru, and maybe Hidden Fortress at that. So it's not at the very top of my list, but I was impressed and I liked it. And it's really his visual style to me that is so strong and unique, and again, a very, very powerful element in how he tells his stories. I think he comes from a generation of filmmakers that were still influenced by silent films, which is something that I've been very interested in, having come out of film school. That the visual graphics and the framing and just the quality of the images goes a long way to telling the story and setting the mood, and you're not going to find really a lot of filmmakers that have the facile quality with the medium that Kurosawa had. A lot of things happen within a frame, and then at certain points he'll go and he'll do lots of cuts, but he does know how to play a frame out. He uses long lenses, which I happen to like a lot, and it isolates the characters from the backgrounds in a lot of cases. So you'll see a lot of stuff where there's big wide shots, lots of depth, and then he'll come in and isolate the characters from the background, and you'll only really focus on the character. So he used a lot of camera techniques to kind of get to the point. In the beginning of Hidden Fortress, the first shot, for example, is the two peasants are panicked about something and everything, and you can't really see what it is. And the shot remains there as the horsemen sweep through it, and then you realize what's going on, and then they go away, and you're still sort of in the same frame. You can't help but be influenced by his use of camera. In say Hidden Fortress, when he chases them into the camp and they gets caught. If you watch the camera movement in there, and again, long lenses panning with the riders as they go into the camp, it builds in intensity until such time as suddenly it stops, and he's surrounded by all these people of the opposing side. The one thing about Hidden Fortress is it did influence me in doing Star Wars, because as I was beginning to write the screenplay and put it together, I remembered Hidden Fortress, and I remembered the one thing that really struck me about Hidden Fortress, and I was really intrigued by, was the fact that the story was told from the two lowest characters. I decided that would be a nice way to tell the Star Wars story, which is to take the two lowliest characters, as Kurosawa did, and tell the story from their point of view, which in the Star Wars case is the two droids. And that was the strongest influence, actually. The fact that there was a princess trying to get through enemy lines and everything, I think was more of a coincidence than anything else, because in my film the princess is more a stand and fight kind of princess. In the beginning I did have, some of the first drafts, I had a little bit more of her and a Jedi, an older Jedi, trying to escape and that sort of thing, but then it evolved eventually into the story of Luke. I think all stories have been around for a few thousand years. There's a book written and a theory among writers that there's only 32 plots, and that it's all the same 32 plots retold. And in a way, I'm not sure that's exactly true, but once you get into writing stories or reading stories or studying the whole issue of stories, you find out that most stories are repeated over and over again. In in Kurosawa, it's trapped behind enemy lines. How can we escape? In the Japanese context of Hidden Fortress, we're talking about a strength of class structure that is kind of unknown in the West, and therefore her assimilating herself into the lower classes is a much bigger issue. It is the Prince and the Pauper story, which is the Western version of this idea where the king and the commoner switch places and each gets to see the other's life, and then it's more of a curiosity than it is an actual emotional catharsis that it happens in Hidden Fortress, where the issue of understanding the other class is much more difficult, and it's very amusing in that you have this old samurai, this general, and a little girl, and it's kind of the teenager and the father issue, which I think is universal. Fathers always trying to deal with their young teenage girls and having about as much success as what goes on in that film. I know Kurosawa was a very big fan of John Ford's, and that he was very, very influenced by John Ford, and you can actually see John Ford's influence in Kurosawa's films, which I think is one of the reasons that they are so accessible to Westerners. It caused him a lot of grief in Japan because of the fact that he was Western in his orientation and storytelling. He was not extremely well regarded in Japan, especially in the beginning. And it was really once his films were taken out of the country and put into international film festivals and that sort of thing that they begin to get recognition, that I think the Japanese begin to soften in their attitude toward his style, because it was a little more emotional than they were used to having them be. And there was a very obvious Western influence from really the great American Western directors. I think somebody asked Kurosawa once, what is in your movies? What are they about? Why are you making them? And he said he's always trying to answer the question, why can't people be happier? And why can't they be happier together? And I think most filmmakers are dealing with issues and questions like that, which are very basic human questions.